morning, everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of the Indica Books Writing Workshop with Otis. This is a platform that encourages, invites readers and writers specifically to submit pieces and get feedback on different aspects of their writing. This is provided courtesy Indica and Indica Books, and we encourage you to send in your pieces, and this is what we do. We meet on a Sunday evening and we discuss those pieces with Otis and others. And we've been doing this since 2020, so we have a lot of writers who have benefited from this exercise, from this series. And without further ado, it's over to you, Otis. I believe you said you had 4 pieces, so we're going to have a good, long, fruitful discussion.
Okay, thank you. One of the pieces is from Swetha, and I don't see her right now.
No, she's not.
Let's start with Arun. Send me something.
Hey, Otis. Can we do mine second? I'm just finishing up dinner. I don't want to see you. I don't want you to see me too. So.
Well, if he can see you writing, I'm sure he can see you masticating. It's
he was saying you can masticate in public.
You guys are evil.
Okay. There's so many different ways this could have gone wrong, Pranshu.
Let's dive in with Ashvani. Let's start with Ashvani. We have Pranshu. Pranshu. We have a politicized piece, and it's likely to get very heated as we discuss it. So we'll involve ourselves with the tale that Ashvani has woven for us today. Ashvani, how are you?
I'm great. And how are you?
Good. I'm glad that our relationships are turning into, sometimes I email people and I twist their arm and say, you must submit something. And poor Ashvani was the recipient of that call. So the heroic call, we might term it. Ashvani, tell us a little bit about this piece.
Oh, I just keep noting down some, ideas off and on in a small diary. So when you asked me to, I pulled out that diary and I looked at it and took out this, small idea that I had put it down there, and then I wrote about it. So it is something which has a conflict, but as you rightly pointed out, at the end, there was no change in any of the characters, not even the protagonist. So that was a weakness of the story.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've covered everything I was going to cover, Ashvani, so quickly. What's left for me to talk about? Let's go back to this thing of the book of ideas that you have. So, is this idea something you heard about, you read about, or did you simply, develop it out of your imagination?
No. I mean, going about normal life, something triggers you as, having the potential to have a conflict. So that is the starting point. If anything looks like to me happening around me, which looks like it's got a potential for, some conflict to build up, then that's the initial trigger for a story in the future. So I just keep jotting down these small things, maybe just a sentence or maybe just half a sentence. But later on, when I look at it, even after months, I'm immediately clear about what was the idea that I was jotting down at that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, this one. So when you think of this, you think of it. So here we have essentially 2 characters, Naresh, and how would you say the first person's name?
Raghotam.
Raghotam. So you have Raghotam and Naresh.
Yeah.
Okay. Ragotam, I will not keep getting that right. I'll forget how to say it as we move along. Ragotam and Naresh.
Why
So
don't you just call him Rags?
Rags, I don't know. That seems deprecatory. Something, I don't know what the word is, but it doesn't sound good.
Okay.
Ragotam and Naresh. So when you think of these two characters, do you think of does this story come to you because you think of because you hear something about the monkey, or you conceive that the monkey is going to be a point of contention, or do you think of it in terms of the characters?
No, the idea was the monkey, because I had seen, come across a longish episode of 1 to 2 weeks where a monkey really harassed people. And so that was actually the idea. Then the rest of these two characters who entered the picture, they are, as far as the idea is concerned, they are just peripheral to it. The main idea was about the monkey creating problem, and some people being in favor of, killing that monkey, doing all sorts of things to him, and some other people feeling that no, he's a holy, not an incarnation, but an embodiment of Shri Hanuman, who has got monkey-like features in the Ramayana, and he's got a very important role to play. So some people have a lot of respect for him. In fact, there are, in India, most of the barber shops won't open on Tuesday, because that is a day held sacred to Shri Hanuman. And Shri Hanuman has got hair all over his body. So people, don't go to barber shops on Tuesday, especially in the northern part of India. And so all the barber shops are shut on Tuesdays. So now here we have got two sides of the story. Here we are confined to 800,000 words. Otherwise, probably there would have been more characters, intoning their ideas in favor of or against what could be done to the monkey. Here, I have just taken two characters because of the restriction of words. So these two have different ideas, and in the end, I just brought it to a very abrupt close, but that needed a little more development, I think.
Oh, well, can I have you read this first page, please?
Okay. And
we'll stop with,
I also must mention that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wrote this whole thing in just about an hour, so I couldn't develop the end, properly. I'll start with this story. As Ragotam entered the room, Naresh almost yelled, "You could have been in time for an emergency meeting at least." Ragotam ignored him, ambled lazily to a chair, sliding it out noisily before plonking on it heavily, all of his 100-odd kgs fitting snugly between its armrests. Naresh began to speak even while Ragotam was settling down. "Gentlemen, the quorum is met. I call this emergency meeting of our Residents' Welfare Association to order. The single point agenda is to deal with this rogue monkey who created havoc in the clubhouse yesterday." Two members raised their hands to speak, simultaneously breaking out into voluble tirades against the monkey. The louder of the two outlasted the other, and Naresh heard him warn the others of what might happen over the next few days if the monkey was not evicted expeditiously. Naresh interrupted. "Yes, I am already looking at options, including getting rid of the bloody bastard." He pointed a closed fist with its index finger pointed at no one in particular to mime a fired pistol. Ragotam sank a bit more into his chair and spoke lazily but loudly enough to be heard over the uneasy babble. "Don't call it a monkey. It is an embodiment of Shri Hanumanji and is sacred to all of us. An attack on Shri Hanuman would be taken as an attack on me personally, and I will take suitable reprisal action." He left it hanging there. Naresh avoided looking at Ragotam and addressed the house. "The monkey's actions yesterday were dangerous and unacceptable, not to mention that they caused a lot of damage to property. We have to get rid of it by any means." A resident spoke out. "I have heard that if you get a black langur, all monkeys run away from the area." Naresh said, but where will you get a langur from? Do you know a source we could tap? There was silence around the table. Raghottam drawled again. What we need to do is to arrange a puja for Shri Hanuman, as he has considered our apartment block worthy of his presence.
Yeah, thank you. What's a black langur?
Langur is an English word, actually. Sometimes it's spelt with just one O instead of two, or an OU. It's a
large monkey.
It's a black simian. It's much larger than the average monkey. Even the largest of monkeys are smaller than the langur. The langur is, it looks big, but not just because of that reason, but because of some thing which nature has built into their genes. If a monkey senses a langur around him, he just disappears and never comes back to that area again. So I've seen this happen personally in 2 Air Force stations where I was, where we got a langur with a professional guy. He travels all the way from maybe 1,000 kilometers with his pet domesticated langur. And the moment he lands up there, all the monkeys just disappear and never come back again to that place.
Ashwani, sometimes I want to encourage you just to write that story. Why don't you write the story about an officer in an Air Force base that has a monkey, and then they hire someone to come in with a black langur to clear it, to tap into something that's more personal. You know, like there's a saying in writing, which I don't ascribe to 100%, but it's write what you know. And what that might mean, because stories are really an investigation of character, that I mean, this is not true. I mean, we understand this, Ashwani, that we do not know ourselves. As I think Oscar Wilde, I can't remember who said, only the shallow know themselves. That's funny. Only the shallow know themselves. But maybe to think about writing a story in which you're probing your own character. I'm just putting it out there because I think, you know, my main comment probably, yes, this story doesn't really decide whose story it is. I can see in the beginning now, even though I was misled a little bit, that Naresh is probably the central character of the story, but we don't really get an access to Naresh. The other character, the more the pious character, you know, we're introduced to him in the second word. So when we do that with our writing, it makes the reader think that this is our subject, basically. So I would be careful about that for all of us. I do try, I think even in modern neurological science, and psychologists talk about anchoring, you know, so we anchor the reader with those first words that we use, and we should anchor the reader probably with our central character. And I think it's probably Naresh. So I was a little confused at first, but then my introduction to Naresh is a kind of difficult phrase. So Naresh, this is a little bit complicated, Ashwani. So Naresh almost yelled. For one, I would cut out almost, because basically you're writing. This is a micro issue, but you're basically saying what he didn't do. I mean, if he almost yelled, then he did something else, right? So that's a weird imaginative space for the reader. They're not really following you then. They're not dealing with something that's concrete. And in that case, it's even a sound. It's only a minor issue, but I would definitely cut almost. I never have characters almost do something. I either have them do it or not do it. Whatever they're doing, they either do or they don't do. That's it.
Got
it. Can I go on though?
Yes, please. I've got that. Thank you.
I'm kidding. That's a joke, because I tend to go on about these things. Okay, so Naresh. So then our introduction to the character is Naresh yelled. And you see that, like, even in that introduction, that character is not complex at all. We're getting a very one-dimensional view of that character. John Barth, he might be an English writer, maybe he's an American writer. But anyway, he said that all stories begin with an unstable ground situation. Everyone should be writing that down at this point. Unstable ground situation. That's an important concept. Take that concept, and that is going to begin each and every one of our stories. That unstable ground situation exists within the character, within the protagonist. It's mirrored, the problem of the protagonist is mirrored in the society. So let's say, I'm just going to use as an example Romeo and Juliet, since we all know it so well. Romeo is the unstable grounds. I'm just going to take him and not Juliet. Okay, we could take either of them, but Romeo is the unstable ground situation. His instability is that he's obligated to hate certain people, right? I forget whether he's a Montague or Capulet, but anyway, he's forced to hate the other one, not the one that he is. So that's his unstable ground situation. Well, that's part of his unstable ground situation. One, he's obligated to hate. And second, he actually loves other people. In this case, specifically Juliet, right? That's the instability, it's the conflict. He's supposed, his family and those he's closest to obligate him to hate. And yet his body, his being himself loves. That's an unstable ground situation. So Arun, I'll get to you in 1 second. Naresh, if he is our protagonist, we need to have him have an unstable ground situation. In a sense, like, and this story could be excellent for that. I would rather have you try and inject into the protagonist yourself, into that character, so that you could explore the instability of that character more thoroughly. Because I think that that's one of the things we do with writing, is that it's what I've done kind of all my life, and I don't know why, but it's a kind of self-exploration of character. But it's not just a self-exploration of character, it's an exploration of the self, but it's also an exploration of the society. If we go back to Romeo, Romeo is obligated by his family, those who protect him and care for him. They obligate from him in return that he hates. But he individually loves, right? That exploration of the character of Romeo also says something about the society too. I'm saying something very complicated here, Ashwani. I'm saying that the exploration of the self and the exploration of one's own unstable ground situation is reflected. It's also an investigation of the societal unstable ground situation. And this is what we're doing as writers. But as writers, writers of fiction, writers of narrative, right? We are sort of selecting as our subject character, as opposed to simply looking outwardly at the society, like an analyst. So we're not projecting outward, we are projecting inward. Ashwani, this might be the most profound thing I've ever said in these Indica Academy.
Yeah, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
I have to hear it again and again and think about it. Yes, think about it. Arun, you had a question?
No, I didn't get the name, but I think I figured it's John Barth, right?
John Barth. Barth. Yeah, I didn't really like his books that much, but he's kind of a famous commenter. I mean, like a lot of writers have commented on writing, and that's one of the things he said. And that's the one that I've taken away, this unstable ground situation. Basically, there's a conflict without and a conflict within, and they mirror each other. So it seems to me, if we look at this story, see, right now Naresh is one-dimensional. He wants to kill the monkey. You can't have it be that way. He might be in the majority on the side of, let's say, I mean, this group here reminds me of sort of a, what do they call it? A homeowners association, right? It's like a condominium complex or something somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would be very funny to me from an American point of view, since we, like in the US, of course, we know condominiums, and you know condominiums too. But this condominium is very different from the condominiums I know, because we don't have any condominiums really that are going to be overtaken by a force of nature, let's say, like this monkey and God, right? So that's a combined, it's kind of a force of nature. It's something beyond human control that comes in and disrupts this community that feels that it's all ordered. It's an association. It has rules. It has all of that. It's very, very charming. It's a very charming, what we call an arena. The arena is the place. Like Verona is the arena for Romeo and Juliet. This maybe condominium complex is the arena for this story. It's a very charming arena, for sure, from my point of view. So Naresh needs to be more internally conflicted, basically. He may feel obligated to side with the majority of we call them HOAs, homeowner association, right? He may, and maybe there's a president of the homeowners association, and he's the executive officer or whatever, however you want to structure it, but he is controlled, in the majority by this group. But I think he should have sympathy for the, give me his name. Ragotam. He should have sympathy somewhere, even if it's not conscious sympathy. In fact, probably best if it isn't conscious sympathy yet, for Ragotam. And then I would draw it out. And what we do is we talked about it. I mean, you mentioned it already, but it's important. We start off with this conflicted character, and then we take them through a series of tests until they realize, in a sense, they have, James Joyce called it the epiphanic moment. I don't think that's exactly right. But anyway, when we take the character on their arc and they go down into the deepest struggle, they're faced with themselves solely. So now the world has fallen away, all its vanity, as we've heard, right? So the world falls away, and now they're just facing themselves. And they're in a position of, that conflict comes into a sharp focus. And they make a decision, right? So Juliet's decision is that is it Juliet? Let's see, no, Juliet is second. It's Romeo first, fakes his death, right? So if it's Romeo's story, he's faced with a decision: is it better to live in a world with hate, or is it better to love, right? He's still actually trying to figure it out when he fake poisons himself. Then Juliet sees him, and she decides that it is better to die than to live in a world without love. She kills herself, and then Romeo comes too. Is that how it goes? Or is it the other way around?
Juliet that fake poisons herself, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, so however it bears out, it's been a while, but however it bears out, whichever character you're deciding on as the primary character and the protagonist, and that's probably going to be the one at the end, so I guess that's Juliet. But anyway, she finally decides that it's better to die than it is to live in a world without love, right? So that's how she makes a decision, essentially. And that's both a commentary on her, right, her character, and something very deep within the human character, and it's a comment upon the world, right? It's a comment upon her choice and a comment upon the world that exists without love. So it's a dual comment. I think Naresh has a similar opportunity, right? We have to take this protagonist through their arc of character, through these various things that happen in our story, to bring them to this point where they have to make an actual decision without the bearing of the homeowners association, the people who are demanding certain things from them, et cetera, et cetera. We have to isolate them alone with everything else stripped away, and then they make a decision based on their heart, the deepest decision that they can make. I think you have the elements here. I still might encourage you to write about, since you know the Langor, obviously the Air Force base, those so intimately well, and you also can know your protagonist infinitely well if you base that character on yourself. It's a verisimilitude of yourself. It's not you, but it's humanized by you. Anyway, I think it's a wonderful story and a great start. You're perceiving the conflict, right, Ashwani? You basically, you have your notebook and you're saying, there's a conflict here, right? I mean, just in the same way that Shakespeare might have, heard on the street that there was this antagonism between the Capulets and Montagues, right? So he's walking around, he hears this story, he's like, wow, that's pretty interesting. I wonder if I can base a story on it. Then what he does is he constructs Romeo and he constructs Juliet, right? And that's a little bit what you might need to do. And it's never bad when someone compares your work to Shakespeare, so take that anyway. Even if, what do they say? Even if you fail in the comparison, I forget, there's a phrase. Even if you fail in the comparison, it's still a good thing.
Yeah.
If you were to do multiple, I don't think you should do multiple characters, but I think that the character of the monkey could be excellent in this piece if you were to have multiple points of view. But I would suggest, because you have a short story, I think it's more economical to just develop one point of view. And you're not really doing that exactly here either.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Could it be done from the monkey's point of view? That would be really interesting.
Yeah, Ashwani.
Actually, I toyed with that idea. I wanted to see that as an experiment. But after writing maybe about a paragraph or so, I realized that if it's the monkey, how would he get into the brains of all the other characters who are actually taking decisions about him? And so I abandoned that idea and came back to this.
The motivation of the monkey, right? Like, why is he in that specific society? You can work on that, right?
No, that would have
better
been...
tree, choicest fruit or something like that,
No, that's true. That can be done. But the problem was that the activities on the ground will finally be dictated by people, not the monkey. the monkey will become a passive, role player in the whole story, because the other people will be either trying to kill him or trying to appease him or whatever. So how would the monkey get into Naresh's mind or Raghuttam's mind to see what he's thinking about me?
The
So,
monkey is.
That's why I gave it up.
Hanuman. The monkey is Hanuman, and he can look into people's minds.
Yeah, I was going to say the next thing was, he's semi-divine, so he does that. He's able to understand that this is my enemy, this is my friend.
But I think it's possible. It's something to experiment with, but I think, when we're, for the sake of time, the way I basically think of it is, who is changed by the story? So the character who's changed by the story, we call the protagonist. The protagonist and antagonist, they could switch around. They're basically antagonistic of each other, but the protagonist is the one who changes. They are able to change because they have an unstable ground situation, right? If they don't start with an unstable ground situation, they can't change to the character who does not have an unstable ground situation. They've come to a place of stasis, at least momentarily, at the end. The monkey, it seems to me, is representative of the forces of nature that creates the kind of havoc and problems that we're seeing here between these characters. A force of nature, whether a god or a monkey, right? Either case, I think, is not the character who changes. I think we become more distant, then I think the reader becomes more distant from the intended avatar of the story. The way the reader has the experience of the story is they basically have a sympathetic connection with the protagonist and therefore go through the protagonist's struggle in verisimilitude with the protagonist. And I'm just putting it forward that that's economical. I think doing something else becomes complex. You're basically, if the monkey were the point of view character, it would be like having an omniscient narrator who was present on the page. These are things we think about. I mean, I think about these things. So we have to make thousands of choices. I think the thing that, I'm going to tell you something that I do not adhere to, but the thing that should guide us is probably economy. That can be frustrating. Anyway, it's a wonderful story. Let's. Do you have any questions, Ashwani?
No, thank you. Thank you. I was going to ask a question, but you answered it already.
Prescient.
One request: remove the baseball bat, put in a cricket bat.
Okay.
I'm not gonna. Let's see. Okay, Arun, let's take a look at this piece.
Yes, Otis.
Tell us a little bit about what you were doing here.
Okay, so this is part of it's probably the key battle in my entire book. This is the third book of the Battle of Vatapi trilogy. I still have maybe half a chapter and the epilogue to write to finish it up. There's a final battle, but that final battle is not as critical as this battle. It's a long battle. My book is about maybe 87,000 words or possibly 90. And the battle is about 10,000. Okay, so it's a lot, 10,000, 12,000 words. Mm-hmm. So there's so many pieces to the battle. I mean, I've sent you, I can see the document there, Battle of Manimangalam, and I don't know if you've had time to read it. I don't expect you to have had time to read it.
I'm going to try and actually get to it this week. So I have some time before I take my trip, and because I have this piece and Sri Charan, I'm not sure if he's here, but he also sent me something very late. So I'm going to try and clear my docket, and then we're going to take a break. So I am going to try and look at it.
Fantastic. So what I've tried to do is each scene, so there's multiple scenes, right? So it's spread over like 3 chapters. Each chapter has maybe 7 to 8 scenes in each. And each scene, I keep shifting perspective, points of view. So there's the right flank, the left flank on both sides, what's happening, the main characters, what's going on. There's a strategic deployment that's happening. So this happens towards the end of the battle where one side is, one side which is getting pushed back almost pretty much throughout the battle has suddenly had some reinforcements arrive and they are now pushing back. And the commander of the other side realizes he's losing. He's in the thick of battle, but he's got the battle lust on him. He's in the thick of battle. All hopes of, a team victory or defeat is gone out of his head. He's a warrior in the midst of battle, and he falls in battle. And I just I'm trying to not say the same things across scenes. I'm trying to show it differently. So I'm showing this, I've written this as if from the mind, I'm echoing every single thought that is in Pratapa's mind as he fights.
Mm-hmm.
That's the context.
Okay. Can you read so do you see that little pink mark I made?
Yeah. You want me to read to that?
Yeah. Let's get a little feel for this piece.
Okay. Control your breath. Focus. Guard up. One at a time. Parry, thrust, duck, weave, parry, swivel, weave, lunge, clean strike. Breathe evenly. Not rushing it. Deep breaths. Move to meet the next man. Quick look around to see where my men are. Where are they? Am I cut off? Have I, in the heat of battle, been cut off from my men? Never mind. Focus. They're at you again. Here he comes. Seems a bit heavy. Doesn't move too well. Should be easy. Sword in his right hand. Clumsy movements, swinging his sword arm all the way back. Heavy muscles. Also probably split me in half. Not so fast, my boy. Weave head away as sword whistles past. You've overextended, haven't you? Here, meet my sword. Didn't expect that much blood to splash on me. Careful now. Step over him. Here comes another one. Slender, well muscled, but slender. Light on his feet. Sword held along his thigh. Still, very still. Balanced. Looks competent. Where have I seen him before? I'm sure I've seen him. Ooh, watch it. That was close. He nearly got you that time while you were letting your mind wander, trying to remember his face. He's good. Fast hands. Parry. I'm being driven back. I hope there are no obstacles behind my legs. Can't afford to fall now. Ouch. He nicked me. Got me on my upper arm. Is that my blood? Can't tell. Too much blood all over me. Damn, he got me again. This time on my other arm. My arms are fatiguing. Weave, move. Watch his feet though. His left foot is extended. Is he waiting to lunge? Damn, he sat down and swept his foot.
Nice. Thank you. So, I think, as you're reading this, I think you're doing, we talked about this, I think, last week, and maybe this is inspired, or 2 weeks ago, maybe at this point, that this is a subjective view that's very much internalized into the character. It can be a little bit awkward, as the character is basically forced to narrate what's happening so that we can understand that something is happening, even though it's basically, it's almost like a stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think that I mentioned this the other day too, with the other piece that we reviewed, that you know, that, I mean, this writing forces me to think of these things. I don't necessarily, you know, I don't have some kind of tome that I can refer or reference to, you know, when I have these experiences with words. But I feel like the typical thing to do is to balance sort of objective information that's really coming from a narrator who is, you know, we can say a limited omniscient narrator, however we want to describe that narrator, but they come in to tell us things that happen as facts. You know, so our character, he moved to the right, right? So he moved to the right is not him thinking. He's not thinking about himself moving to the right. He's simply moving to the right. So he doesn't have words to describe that. So the narrator comes in and gives us those words. He moved to the right and ducked, narrowly missing the sword blow. That was close, he thought, right? So as he felt the blade, you know, move past his forehead, the air in its wake brushed his eyelid, right? Something like that, right? And then it's like, and he thought that was close. His heart thumped. So even when we say his heart thumped, that's the narrator coming in to tell us, because he's not thinking that his heart is thumping. So I think that this is sort of, it creates a kind of instability from the narrative point of view, because the narrative is everything, right? But from the narrative point of view, it's a little bit awkward, because we don't know where, in a sense, when we read what I was just describing, where we have objective information and subjective information, we're sort of understanding vaguely that it's the narrator, but we feel like we're attached to the point of view character. So in a sense, we're located someplace. We're located in this merger of narrator and point of view character like that. But when we read this, we're kind of only in the point of view character, and some of it, we're like, it creates a little instability for us. We don't know really where we're located, because it doesn't make sense that the point of view character would also be narrating the experience. That is a bizarre way to say it. If you understand any of that, Arun, I'm going to be very happy and feel very successful.
No, I understand, but okay, here's where I want to have this. I understand exactly what you said. Okay, in fact, typically I would have written it the way you said it, right? Which is
Yeah.
move to the right, you know, and then he thought this, and then again I would have described the action and then the thinking. I wanted to move away from that for this piece. I don't know why. It just came to me as I was writing. I said, okay, this is the commander of the forces. What if I were to take the reader into the, you use the word which I never thought of, but that's exactly correct, which is into the consciousness of that character. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if he's not thinking it, these elements are passing through his consciousness in terms of noticing this guy is slender, he's holding his sword this way. Those are not his thoughts, but those are that's mindfulness, which is part of his consciousness. And then they're intermingled with his thoughts as he's thinking about, right? So that's the deliberate attempt that I tried here. It's an experiment. Okay. I'm not, I just felt, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think so like when you say slender and when you say well muscled but slender, so if we understand, you know, he looked to the right, he saw blah blah, you know, so when I say he saw, that's a narrator coming in, right? Okay. Telling us something objective. But then we get what he saw. So basically the narrator creates a conduit, and you're dropping that out, right? You're dropping out that he saw. So it's, everything is possible. I'm wondering, I'm just going to say a couple things, and I don't have the answers, but maybe this wants to be, maybe this wants to,
you are not known to pull your punches, so please don't pull your punches.
No, I'm not pulling punches. It's just, it's not that. It's just that, you know, there is no right and wrong in terms of what we're doing. I mean, you know, we're all exploring. I mean, we have this difficult medium, which is words, and we're all exploring it. And we're trying to make these words reflect reality of some kind. And they're words, you know, they're like pretty inadequate. Yeah.
Can I ask you one question before you tell me the things that you're going to tell me, right? The question is this: when you were reading it, did you flow easily from beginning to end? I mean, did you read it as an editor, or did you read it as somebody reading a story? How do you read this? How do you read any piece? Is the question when you first read?
So what I absolutely read as a reader. So okay. I'm always editing second. Like, I don't have a list of rules. What I have is I try to explain to sometimes, like, you know, I basically what do they call that? The willing suspension of disbelief. I have this willing suspension of disbelief. I jump in. You know, I start reading the words, and those words start impressing upon me. But what I'm also conscious of is where I mean, maybe hyperactively so, where I am in relationship to the words I'm reading. So, like, if something pushes me away, I notice it. Then I'm able to go to my vast storehouse of boilerplate, you know, hullabaloo, and ascribe my feeling. I'm basically like my feeling. I'm like a canary in a coal mine, right? The canary is affected by, you know, the noxious gases sooner and dies. That's kind of like me. I'm hypersensitive. Okay. That's what I think.
Okay, wonderful. So was it an easy read, or was it a confusing read for you? That's what I want to understand.
Well, it was a I would say that, so this is kind of where I'm getting to. It was a particular kind of read, right? Yeah. And it was a particular kind of read that was obligating me to accept this sort of difficult space where the character was internally narrating the experience for me, right? So that was a difficult space a little bit, but it's not to say that I can't get used to it. I could. So, like, that, this is what I was going to say. Like, so I could see, you know, sections like this, written like this, juxtaposed with more objective sections that would then give me an experience of objectivity and then draw me into this subjective world. And then I would go out to objectivity again and then drawn in again. So if I was, because what we want to do, it's a question of pace. When I read this piece all by itself, I'm like, okay, I'm only in this space. Does this work for the duration? To be here like this, if it were just spread out, I would be like, I don't know. But what we want to do in our writing is we do want to take our reader on what we call it a roller coaster. So it doesn't really matter what the poles are, the up and the down. It doesn't really matter. It's that we take them like this so that they have, by oscillating, they have an experience of experience, basically. So I could see that working, but I do have, so the big comment is, it kind of depends. If you're going to do this, I think it would be extremely interesting to see it done with multiple characters, perhaps. It sounds like you have this larger battle and overview, and it would be really interesting if the way that when we go into the consciousness of a character, that consciousness is different for each character, right? That's pretty interesting.
I haven't done that because this is actually the only scene, the only piece in that entire 10,000 or whatever word battle, which you are going to read this next week. This is the only scene in it which has been written this
Okay.
Only.
Well, I can't say what works and what doesn't work, but I mean, it is intriguing, and I like the fact that you're drawing me into this character. So the things that I'm just gonna throw out are maybe this needs to be more stream of consciousness.
Okay.
So in a sense, more subjective, less attached to the real world, right? Or attached to the real world and then become more stream of consciousness as we go, right? There's a number of things to play with in terms of how you construct this event, right? Right now, it's sort of like a piece. It comes in and it's just doing one thing, but might it develop over the course of this? He dies at the end, and I think the way you handle the ending is interesting, except for I wonder if it's absolutely believable.
I'll tell you why I saw that comment, and you know why. My uncle died when he was dying. My cousin was with him, and he was actually checking his blood pressure. Okay, the pulse, and the pulse kept falling. Now, when the pulse kept falling, before the medical, the hospital van arrived, my cousin was trying to lift him up. Okay, he held on to him, but my uncle kept saying, "I'm falling, I'm falling." Okay, so in a way, when the pulse was falling, it gave him the impression that he was actually falling physically, even though he wasn't.
I thought that worked well. What I was questioning a little bit more was him thinking in his final moments, thinking mainly about the flag. I mean, I could see him not understanding the flag, but having his concern be so, let's say, nationalistic, as opposed to anything else. Like, who are the people he's attached to in life? Who are the people he's going to miss? That I wonder about.
Yeah, but true. But I think so. Okay, agreed. But here's my thought on that. He's a warrior. He's fighting a battle. In the heat of it, the moment. I know it's common to say, okay, you're thinking of loved ones. My point of view was, no, he's the commander of the fort, and he sees a flag there, which is not his flag.
Yeah, I kind of got that. So think about it this way. This is a complex point. You're right that we as writers, you could say that we trade in stereotypes, because we trade in archetypes. We're using language basically to trigger common experience in our reader. So that means that there's a common experience that we're talking about. When we diverge from that common experience, we might tip our hat to the common experience, so that way we mitigate the difficulty of going into a territory that's unusual. I mean, it could even be, like we do it all the time, like, this is, if something happens that's coincidental, you say it's a coincidence. It was coincidence that he should arrive at the party exactly at 9 o'clock, right? So it's like, I mean, you're just constructing it anyway. You're just trying to mitigate that problem. So even if it's like, he thought, while many might think that he thought of his wife and his children, instead he stared at the flag. It's the only thing that seemed to matter to him in the end. But I thought that the falling thing I thought was very effective, actually. So I'm pleased to hear that story, and I think it's a really great thing for you to take things from life that you've experienced and seen, and then draw them into this experience. And that's, we can say that that's what can we write about the experience of death? It's a hard thing for us to access. And it sounds like you did have an access point, and I did find it effective. I found that to be, after going through the entire piece, in which I was sort of this way and that, I was finally, you achieve something at the end, because I'm going through and I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable with the experience, but I am in his experience, right? So even though I'm a little uncomfortable, I'm in it. And then when I get to the end, then basically what happens to him happens to me, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for, the verisimilitude of experience. So I think that was effective. I'm going to throw out just this other thing. So you have ouch, you have ooh, you have some other things that are describing basically kind of emotion, in emotional words. I'm not saying what's right and what's wrong, but there's a saying amongst us writers. We say, our character doesn't cry, so our reader will. What I take that to mean, and this is something, again, that I think all of us should at least grapple with, is that the point for us is not to write emotion. The point for us is to dramatize situations that evoke emotion in the reader. That's what that means. So
Got it.
Even when we have something like ouch, which is pain, we want the reader to go ouch, right? We want the reader to cry. We want the reader to feel sadness, fear, pity, these essential emotions. We want the reader to have that. So we write the other stuff. We write the dramatization. We write the blade came and swept, whatever we're going to write. I mean, so that the reader goes, ouch.
Can you say that again? You said the statement that you've said, that you said, we writers say, and I thought that was a very interesting statement.
Okay, so the beginning statement,
Yeah.
Writers, characters don't cry, so the reader will.
Thank you. That was very interesting. I noted that. Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah. And so I would deal with that, what I consider a truism of what we're after, because we write the events and the reader feels them. That is the compact that we create. We don't write the events and the feeling and then have the reader just read them. No. The reader feels them, but they feel them because there's an absence of them here. Just the events and then the feeling of those events.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah, so
I just realized that this piece is not part of the battle that I sent you. It's part of the next battle, which is the storming of a fort. So you won't find it in this.
Arun, you write about a lot of battles, and sometime we'll have to talk about that. But it'll be a different conversation at a different time.
Okay. Yes, we should. I would love to learn something on that as well.
Ashwani, yeah, you have a question?
I just have two very small points. One is in this whole piece of Arun's, it holds your attention, but I noticed that there are actually two different types of writing that is going on. I'll just take two examples. The first sentence of the first paragraph, control your breath. So it is the protagonist or the main character, he's talking to himself. So there are two people, two persons. One is the guy who's speaking and one is the guy whom he's speaking to. They are both the same, but this is what is happening. In the first sentence of the second paragraph, quick look around to see where my men are. Now he's talking to the reader. He's not talking to himself anymore. So this alternation is taking place throughout this whole page. Maybe it needs standardization to be him either always talking to the reader or always talking to himself. One of the two. For example,
next one becomes not so fast, my boy. Yeah, you're right. I know when you said it, pointed out, it is looking like that. Slender. The next one is also to the reader.
So
right? You're alternating, yeah.
So the first sentence of the first paragraph, if you wanted to standardize, would read something like, I need to control, he needs to say, you need to control your breath, something like that. because now when he's talking to himself, and then he keeps alternating between talking to the reader and talking to himself. And the other point which I had, sorry.
Will you be able to keep your other point? So,
okay.
So what you're saying now corresponds. I just want to draw them together. What this corresponds to what I was saying before about the narrator. So the narrator talks to the reader. He said, "Control your breath." He thought, "Control your breath." So the narrator speaks to the reader. He thought, I'm telling the reader, and they understand that. They understand that relationship. And then we have what he thought, "Control your breath," which is him speaking to himself. Right? So I'm just pointing out that you and I are perceiving the same thing. And this is a little bit of where I'm saying there's a difficulty, because we're like this, I know you're familiar with the yin yang, right? It's a very famous symbol, of course, but that sort of expresses what the narrator and character, how they form together. And the reader is comfortable with the two of them. But in this case, we have just the point of view character handling both, which makes it difficult for the reader to understand where their location is. The reader actually wants to be two places. So the reader wants to be two places simultaneously. They want to be with the narrator, which makes them safe, and with the character, which makes them in a situation of struggle and risk. We, the reader, does not want to be the character, because being the character is too frightening. We want to, as a reader, we want to be able to read about struggle in safety, and having both of them together allows us to do that. We get to sit in our armchair and read. We don't want to be this guy, do we? Arun, maybe you do, but I don't. I don't want to be in this situation. I want to read about it in safety, and that sort of yin-yang of narrator and point of view character allows that to happen. So I'm just pointing out that we're speaking about the same thing.
Sure.
Arun.
Can I just, Ashwini, first of all, I know you have another point, but thanks for bringing it up, because, see, this is my first draft. I haven't reread it actually after I wrote it, but you make a very good point. I can now see that there is the two things. But I want to take issue with something Otis said. But
umbrage. We like to say umbrage.
No, umbrage is too strong a word. A quibble, okay? The quibble is this. In a past discussion, we had spoken about, when I had said that I think of it visually, like almost like a camera. You had said something really, which kind of affected me a lot, which was the difference between, and Sid Field also says that in the screenwriting book, which is the difference between the movie and a book is that in a movie, you can only show things near a character's perspective, or maybe as if it's looking through his eyes, but not actually getting into the character. Whereas in a book, it allows us to do that. So this is my attempt. And again, it's an attempt to get into the character. So when you say that the reader doesn't want to be in it, are we sure of that? I think if you're reading a book, if I'm reading Harry Potter, I want to experience Harry Potter's, the Dementors when they come for him, as if I were Harry Potter. Is that, yeah. So that was my point. That was the quibble.
So go back to the yin yang. I'm basically saying that, stepping away from masculine, feminine, good and evil, all of that stuff. Forget all that. But we think about the yin yang. I'm basically saying that the narrative consciousness is a dual consciousness. It's a dual consciousness. So it has the flavor, right? It has the distance of the narrator, and it has the closeness of the point of view character. And we basically we can do various things with it. We can make it more distant. We can bring it closer. We can do all these different things. And this particular section is very close to the character. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, the reader does not. So, like, I just watched a movie in which someone was. It was interesting. It was on Netflix, and it's called The Gray Man. And there's a Tamil character in it.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a very chilly dude, also,
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I really like that sort of, it was like very purposeful highlighting, and really kind of interesting. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so I mean, there's an actor I liked, Stanton. No, what's his name? Not Harry Dean Stanton, but something like that. But anyway, he's being tortured and he's having his fingernails pulled out. I don't want to have my fingernails pulled out on them. Sorry. Different strokes for different folks, I gotta say, but like, I don't. So the reader, this is what I mean by being, like being completely the character. We enjoy a story as a situation of struggle. We enjoy it because we're sitting in a chair reading it. So that's the reality. The reality is we're reading about it. So we're having two experiences, both sitting in a chair and being imaginatively immersed. And that's the dual consciousness.
So isn't this help me understand this, Otis. I was thinking of this as, if I have to ascribe a point of view, this would be a first person point of view. Am I incorrect? Is that something that I've done incorrectly? Yeah?
So even in first person point of view, what happens in first person point of view is that first person, we're getting into very complex stuff a little bit, but when we say I, we actually create two I's. This is me. I've not read this somewhere, but this is what I've come to believe, because I believe in this I've sort of constructed this idea of consciousness, and particularly dual consciousness. When we write in first person, one of those I's is the narrator, and one of those I's is the character. And it can be very difficult to write in first person if you cannot intellectually or emotionally, whatever it is, wherever our writing comes from, you can't distinguish between those two. Because what you can end up doing is you can write a story in which the I narrator takes up the majority of the space, but the reader is not really interested in the life of the narrator. The narrator has no skin in the game. We are interested in the character who does have skin in the game, and importantly, not our skin, right? That's the important thing. So the narrator reminds us that it's not our skin, but that's what we're interested in, because it's the person who's the point of view character. It's the character who really who's taking a risk. And that's what makes the struggle have a stake of importance to us. And that we can learn from, as we do in this piece. Like, we finally go down, we don't want to die, right, Arun? But we learn about the experience of death through this character. I'm only able to do that because I'm both distant and involved with the character. If someone had told me that I'm going to be able to have the experience of death, but I'm also going to die, I would say, no, thank you. I'll do that some other day.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry, Ashwini had another point. So.
The other point was that I don't know the text before this and the text after this, but I'm just presuming that those texts before and after have got longer sentences than what this page has.
Yes.
Okay.
Those are written in normal style. Yeah.
Okay. So the style here is of very short staccato sentences. In fact, one word sentences at places. But this whole thing, had it been only, say, 100 odd words, it would have made much more impact than a whole page. That's what I feel. Because now what has happened is that when you read this whole thing, by the time you reach somewhere halfway, you are wondering what's happening. I mean, if it was just a short scene, in which things happen very quickly, and therefore you have made the sentences staccato. That would make little more sense. I don't know, maybe you can try this out. Instead of writing this whole thing in short bursts of staccato sentences, some
I
different...
think there was, yeah, no, thanks, Ashwini. That's a great point of view. I think the thought was, I wanted the short sentences to kind of, because he's in the middle of battle, his breathing is short. So he's not going to be thinking long sentences when he's fighting. So it's just the most elemental things that he's thinking of, just leave, oh, who's this guy? The way you do if you were in battle, that was the thought. Now, yeah. So I get what you're saying, but my thought in terms of breaking it into really short sentences was that.
These are style issues. Ashwani, when you bring that up, it seems to me that, when I read Faulkner, that when we move into stream of consciousness, it's usually a very long sentence. And I know that I have experimented with writing, in grad school, we had to write the Faulkner-esque sentence of, 100 words. And I think it's a good exercise, and to see what, again, the words, the things that we're putting on the page, these symbols affect the way the brain works in our reader. So what effect do we want to get? That's the question. I could actually see, as you were talking, Ashwani, I was taking it and I was like, maybe I wanted to go more staccato. So weave, move, watch, feet. His left foot extends. Waiting, he lunges. Damn, sweat falling. I mean, I could see it being more staccato. I mean, but these are our tools, the words and our punctuation and our sentences. This is creating the music. So the question might be, do you only want one type of music, right? And also, to me, a little bit, the music is not consistent, because like when I go staccato, I cut out though, I cut out all these words, right? So I'm making it more staccato. So I might see something that's stream of consciousness. And this is in fact how I write all the time. I have shorter sentences when I want to quicken the pace. And then I have longer sentences when I want to draw people into a more dreamlike situation.
Yeah, that was the idea here, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I keep this in mind when I do the redraft. So,
okay,
my point was only this, that the staccato sentences, to, like you said, to bring in that sense of something urgency, some action happening. It's like comic relief in a text. You can't have a comic relief going on for such a long time that it now becomes the story by itself. And it's not providing relief, but it has become the main story. So if you have staccato sentences for such a long period, the urgency of the whole thing, the importance of making short sentences and showing that some action is going on, very fast moving action, is lost, because now you're going on for one page of short sentences. That's what the point that I was making.
Ashwani, everyone is agreeing with you. This is what I think so interesting. No one is I agree with you. It's always going to be this. We always want to be modulating the experience. And the way we modulate it is the pace. And we want to do it purposely, so that it corresponds to the material that we're offering. But I mean, I make this argument that this movement, this emotional movement, is more important than the words we put on the page. Because this is the thing, again, that draws the reader through the sense that they're having an experience. Because we'll notice that that modulation is also the way that we live our lives, right? We're satisfied, we are hungry, we feel periods of homeostasis and then disequilibrium, and then homeostasis and disequilibrium, and then homeostasis. I mean, this is the biological rhythm. And we mirror it in our writing. So Ashwani, no one's disagreeing with you. I just want to take that away. I know you won't probably. You'll say, when this is over, you'll be like, why? Why have they done this to me again?
No. I was just.
We have to get to Pranchu's work, because this is really going to open up.
Thank you, thank you, Otis, and thank you, Ashwini, as well as Sricharan, who gave a comment. But thank you so much for engaging, and I had fun with this discussion. I learned something, so thank you.
That's great. The main thing is, let's all not think too much. We try not to think too much. Let's draw ourselves into the narration. And this is a great step and a great experiment into involving yourself into the stream of consciousness. Now that we're looking at it and we're analyzing it, that's a much different place. But the real thing that you're experiencing here is you're imagining the consciousness of this character in the moment. That is the kind of work we need to be doing all the time with all our characters. The same with Ashwani's character, who's in this meeting, and then this person walks in late. We have to explore. We want to explore his consciousness. We don't just want him to yell at everyone, right? Just push everyone away. We want to explore that consciousness. So it's really good work. This is awesome, and awesome discussion. Too intellectual, way too intellectual, but that's what we're doing here. Okay.
No, I think this is a very good discussion. Lots to take away here. But to your point, Otis, intellectual discussion, I would say that I think this is important. This is required, because all of the intellectual discussion, cogitation, disagreements, debates, disputes, and all, I think they need to happen during the writing and the editing stage, so that the reader doesn't have to, go through that when they're reading the book.
Yeah, and I think that it's important for the writer to recognize that we do two things. I mean, I've always really strongly felt this. The creative part of us, we need to give free rein. We don't want a critic. We don't want some critic involved in the creative process. We want the creative process to be able to just go. I think Arun was asking me about my process. I basically just walk into a piece always emotionally. He asked me if I read as an editor. I do not read as an editor. I mean, I'm not looking for reference errors. I'm not looking for, that reference errors is a good example, but it's like I'm reading along and I'm like, and I think I marked 1 for Ashwani, but it's like, I don't know who's being discussed. Like I'm there, I'm like, and it goes, da 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 da, and then he, da da, and I'm like, which he? And I'm like, I don't know. And then I go, now I become an editor and I say, I circle it and I write reference, right? It's our involvement with that piece, but do be the creator, and Arun, I really appreciate how much you take this on. You hear these concepts and then you dive in to imagine it. And then, yes, here we say, well, these might be, wobbly, or it might be this, that, and the other thing. And I try anyway to say things as simply, the things that I say to all of you are things that I've tried to simplify for myself so that I internalize them, so that they show up when I'm creative and not thinking. When I'm creative and imagining, I am not thinking. I am telling you that. When I'm thinking about the modulation of the emotional experience and I'm trying to write it, it's sort of like the way I do think of it. I think of it as having a lucid dream, if you know that experience, which is the character that's in the dream, and everything that's happening around the character is a dream. It's clearly not exactly in your control, but when it's a lucid dream, you can kind of lead it just a little bit, but you still don't really know where it's going to go. You're like just a little bit out ahead of your dream. And that's how I write. Okay, Pranshu, we gotta get involved in this. So okay. Pranshu, I can tell you know a lot about this. So we have to be economical in our discussion.
That's what I was telling you, right? First I wrote it like I was on the train, so I just wrote it quickly as like a 700 word thing, and then it was too termy, too many terms and too much technical. And then I cleaned it up. I said, okay, let me give the full history, because I don't believe this deal will ever go through. 2 years from now, they will cancel it. But the thing is, that's what but that's what I was basically aiming for, that, it is something which was there in 1950, as it could have started in 1950, this beautiful friendship. That's why jokes about all that, the Casablanca jokes come in. That would have been a beginning of a beautiful friendship, and it didn't happen. So,
yeah.
So that's basically
one thing. So I was I was reading my trusty copy of Aristotle, Franchu, and specifically Poetics, and Aristotle, he has some ideas about characters and Poetics, and he says, first the characters should be good. The second is that there should be propriety. I don't agree with all these things necessarily, or particularly how Aristotle expresses them. I mean, he was ancient Greek, and so some of our ideas differ. Then he talks about resemblance, but then the fourth one is the one that I wanted to draw your attention to. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get it on here. Uniformity, Franchu, uniformity.
Yeah.
So, and this actually, and in a complex way, Arun, I'll draw this to when we talk about that yin yang. So that yin yang that represents a kind of dual consciousness of point of view, character, and narrator combined. That is uniformity. When we do that in a single way, right? That represents uniformity. Franchu, here, I think that's one of the difficulties. But I think that the fundamental difficulty is I actually don't know what you want to say in this piece. I know what I think, right? I know when you bring up this political maneuver, and then I looked it up, right? And I saw that Modi had come and he just talked to Biden and they just announced this deal. I know what I think about it politically. It sounds to me politically like the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
China. It's not that actually, right? Yeah. See, that's the thing.
I'm not trying to. I don't want to step into a maelstrom here, but that's what it sounds like to me. When you go back to the 50s, so in that context, I'm sort of like, well, why wasn't the US, what has changed? What has changed is that the US has directed it has framed its antagonistic foreign policy with China, right? That's a framing from a storyteller's point of view, right? I'm just a storyteller. I'm not a politician. But they've now framed US versus China. They had framed US versus
Russia.
Well, but between that was the terrorists. So we had the terrorists, and then we had Russia before that, and then it was Germany and the Axis powers, and then et cetera, et cetera. So we have a new frame, and it seems to me politically that if we go back to the 50s, there's a lot of reasons that the US did not have an alliance with India. India was anti-colonialist, right? Which means anti-imperialist. I don't know where India.
America is not an imperialist power. America is never a colonial power. America was the first colonial country to become independent. So it was logical that we would be the best of friends, the largest and the oldest democracy, right?
I'm not sure that I would agree with you about US not being an imperial power, but let's.
Yeah, Philippines, yeah.
And colonialism changed, of course, and then there was taking over Vietnam, right? So moving in for the French into Vietnam, and I don't know where India stood on the Vietnam War, but that
actually,
was
that came a little later. Yeah, that Vietnam was always like we were in both the boats. We were okay with the Vietnamese. We were okay with the Americans helping out the South Vietnamese, because there's actually see, that's where the thing is. Everybody looks at something as a single individual component. India is like 30 different states, 300 languages. So Vietnam is just not Vietnam. It is like 15 different languages there, 22 different types of people and everything. So there's always a cross connection here. Like even Cambodia, we don't look at Cambodia as a single individual. It's a bunch of local groups, and Thailand, everything. So it's basically because Indians sort of look at everybody outside from our own viewpoint, where we are not really, one people. We are a group of, people. So that's where that difference is there. Americans, yes, they came from like a common source, right? Europe and, well, initially from England and Ireland, England. And so later on, that multiculturalism came in. But it always they look upon people. And I myself am American now, so I say that, we tend to now look at others basically as a composite figure, not as individuals themselves.
Right. Okay. So Pranshu, you're describing exactly the opposite way that Americans look at other places in the world. So, we Americans say we are good, and then they look and they say they are bad, or they agree with us, and then we'll have an alliance. But the
You're either with us.
colonialism, anti-colonialism is a problem for the U.S., I would say, and certainly as epitomized by our Vietnam issue, in which we basically sided with European colonial powers, as we have tended to do. That, well, coming in for the French, right, and taking over the issue of Vietnam under the guise of fighting communism. So there's two things going on. There's this sort of ideological war going on, and there's a colonial imperialist war going on. And India's independence, place it at odds with some of these directing influences in U.S. foreign policy. But anyway, but things have changed. Let's try and figure out what. See, I know how I would write this piece, Pranshu, but I want to know what you want to say. I mean, I think that I'm guessing that are you a Modi fan? Because this Modi has done this, right? So this is an alliance that's been constructed.
No, I'm a Modi fan, but I don't think this is an achievement. I don't think it'll pan out. You see, I've looked at the details of this agreement. So you see, so basically, one of the things. So my old office, the gas turbine research establishment, was shut down by Modi in 2014. There's a lot of other reasons for it. There was like 30 years, it was just hemorrhaging a lot of money, not getting anywhere. So we stopped our design of a jet engine, right? So jet engine is the epitome of the design. Everybody, even the Chinese, have a fourth generation, I think, almost done, the AWS-10, which is powering the F-15. But Indians had a first generation one. We never got a second generation. We never tried to make a
Okay,
third.
I'm going to stop you. Let me stop you. So this is going again. I know you know a lot of details, but now let me ask you a question. Are you an engineer? Is this your background?
Yeah.
And you're an aviation engineer?
Well, no, not our aviation software side, but I'm very much familiar with the aviation side.
Okay.
Also,
okay.
The mechanics
but
behind it.
You worked with this company that did aviation.
Yeah.
Okay.
HAL in Bangalore. Yeah.
Okay. So that is, there are different ways to talk about it, but that ethos, your familiarity, and I can tell you're familiar. Clearly, I mean, you're able to, discuss this. Like I'm able to discuss writing, for example, right? I mean, you clearly have a certain expertise. but that ethos, that sense of standing, like, that's an important legal concept. You want to have some place where you establish that in this piece. I think you also have to have a clear, right now I'm not clear on what you want to say. And I don't know if you're being unclear because you don't want to say something that's critical of Modi.
Well, yes, there is a bit of it. Like, I feel that there is that, like, it is the same thing which happened with the Rafale. They just ended up purchasing 36. We need 130 planes, but he's buying just 99 engines. So, it doesn't make sense. What are the other 100 planes are going to fly without engines? Like, 99 engines means 30 planes. At the most 30 planes you can use 99 engines with.
Right. It's symbolic. I mean, there's a symbolic gesture that's involved here. I mean, to me, the thing that's least advantageous, it seems to me, is developing a kind of militaristic alliance with the United States as India against China. I mean, that doesn't seem to be advantageous. But
exactly, and that's the other part of it. Like 30 planes, and they have like 5,000. China has that. See, what Chinese they go for is not quality; they go for quantity, and they can put up 5,000 planes, and that's where the thing. See, there's another brief background I'll give you. IAF always defeats United States Air Force in all air exercises.
Well, because
we use the concept of numbers. We use
the Greek pugilists used to say that a skilled big man will always defeat a skilled little man.
Right.
So it's like,
that didn't happen in Korea. That didn't happen in Vietnam. That didn't happen in Afghanistan or Iraq. See, that's the thing. That Greeks may be right about in 600, 500 BC. But
I think that we could have a spirited discussion on military strategy.
Folks. Quick time check. We are at an hour and 40 minutes. So
okay. Yes. We need to bear down. We will have our discussion, our military history discussion on another day. But for now, let's try and figure out what's going to happen with this piece. Right. I think that you have to figure out exactly what you want to say and you feel comfortable saying.
Okay.
It's right now. It's so you're drawing in so many things. Yes, you're writing it on a train. You're pulling in all of your ideas, but you have to, I think, decide. Just make this as simple as you can. Say what you wish to say. If there are things that you don't wish to say, try and limit your scope so you deal with the things inside your scope and not the things that you don't want to deal with that are going to be outside of your scope. And it sounds to me that what you're saying is that basically, if the point is to develop Indian air power, it's difficult. I mean, you're really going to have to, because I don't know if I'm not sure that you're going to want to go into the past. I think you might simply want to deal with the present, because once you go into the past, you're basically bringing up, to me, you're bringing up, like, when you say, this is too little, too late. To me, that brings up, well, why didn't they do it sooner? And to me, that brings up a whole lot of issues between America and India, their ideologies, their cultures that have put them at odds, in a sense, throughout that period in which there was no help, right? I mean, just the gestures of help by presidents, but then it was nullified by Congress, whatever. And I don't think that is really the thing that you want to talk about.
Right.
I think
See,
that would be an interesting, very interesting thing to talk about.
what exactly, so that's what I'm thinking is more like, see how Indians approach problems is they basically let it fester till either it goes away or it becomes in such a way that they have to lance it out. So that's the thing, I think what they're going for right now, which I believe, but I don't have enough data for backing that, is they're hoping for that the Air Force will be meaningless. Your space aircraft, right? The same engine, G414, is actually going to power the NASA's X-59, right? The spacecraft, the next level up. So instead of spending money on aircraft, which are going to become redundant tomorrow, we may be at least thinking of either the pilotless vehicles, which are also using G414, and the spacecraft. So but then there's no data for that, and maybe 10 years later I would be right, and they said, yeah, that's what we were going for, because we have drastically dropped our military preparedness, especially with the aircraft. As you talked about China and other thing, why take on such a big power, but at the same time you're not putting in enough people you're not putting up enough pilots in the planes, you're not putting up enough planes out there, the numbers are not backing what they are talking about. And so but again, that's what that's one part of it. The other part is,
okay, let me stop you again. Let
Yes.
me stop you again, Pranshu. So, Arun, did you have a question?
No, I had an observation, if I may, Pranshu. See, Pranshu, from all I have heard you say on our group chats and everything, you're one of the most well-informed people on possibly the widest range of topics that I've ever seen. Okay, Otis, we've got a common group, and pretty much any topic, and Pranshu will have off the top of his head, he'll be throwing facts and figures at us. But I think that is what is inhibiting this particular article, because when I read an article, I want to be told a story always, and this is just a collection of random facts and figures that's coming at me.
Yeah, that's what Otis was talking about, that either take one train, and the train should be basically how we basically went about getting that engine from 50s and have never actually got it, instead of digressing into the other.
Yeah, there's so many things that you know, but you don't need to put everything here, is all I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a question of focus, Pranshu, yeah. And then focus and then tone. So, I mean, the other thing that you do, and I think it's, I feel like I do this. So, like, I know a lot of stuff, honestly, and we'll have a very serious discussion about Vietnam someday. But when I'm throwing in too many things, then I also start to make jokes.
And that's why I was doing that. Yeah.
And yeah, so we need a focus. We need a thesis statement. If you want to say, so whether you get the engine or not, if you take it as like, let's say you're not dealing with whether getting the engine is a good thing or not, or whether being sort of leveraged against China is a good thing or not, or any of those things. Forget all that stuff and then just deal with the engine. The fact of the matter is that we've almost, that we've been offered this technology before. Right?
Yes.
I'm fascinated with why and how India has not developed the technology themselves. That's to me,
that's another
almost more interesting. Like when people talk about technology, I understand that like things get patented and people are making discoveries, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems to me that finally, at the end of the day, it's all based on physical principles that are available to anyone. And I'm not trying to move you around here.
And that's the point. Everybody talks about this thing, right? It's an 80% technology transfer. 58% of any aircraft engine technology is common physics. Everybody has that. See,
yeah.
And beyond that, there's the coating, there's a special, like how you basically control the heat through and all those are special.
Oh my God!
Again, I don't. I had those in the first one. I removed all of those. You don't.
Okay,
you
but
didn't get to
Pranshu,
see
you
those
just have
parts.
to figure out. You have to figure out how to write. I would like this essay to be just a. It's going to be short. It's going to be on a website. You know, this is a classic 5-paragraph essay. Please write it as such, right? So basically, in a 5-paragraph essay. I mean, I think that is a brilliant point. I mean, yes, you know so much, and that's your strength. Okay, I mean, we know this truism: your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. You know too much. Okay, you know too many things, and that is undermining you here. Write a classic 5-paragraph essay, right? The 5-paragraph. Then the first paragraph, you develop the context, and then you make your thesis statement. The second paragraph, you write a history. The third, you write one point of view. The other, you write the opposite point of view, and then you conclude. That's all. Focus each paragraph. I mean, you're writing sentence by sentence here. When we look at it, we can see that it's a bunch of fragments. So, and what you have here, you have a history, but you have to reduce it to one paragraph that we can understand. And then you have to give the 2 points of view, and you don't want to write a straw man. I mean, the way, when Arun says you want to write a story, the way I take that in nonfiction is that you have to write a thesis statement, but a thesis statement basically puts out one point of view in which there is an opposing point of view. What's the opposing point of view? And when we write it, when we write our 5 paragraphs, so we have the introduction, which is context and thesis statement. The second paragraph, which is history, right? The third paragraph, which is going to be, I think that it's going to be the antagonistic point of view. It must not be a straw man. This is the most important thing. If I'm going to say one thing, honestly, the construction of the straw man argument has given us the fate of the world as we have it today.
Exactly. Basically,
people arguing one point and basically writing a diminished, second point. And sorry, it's not my buddy Aristotle, but it's Plato and Socrates that does this the most, right? You have Socrates is all-knowing, he's amazing, and whoever he's pitted against is just basically an idiot, right? Don't do that. Write the antagonistic point of view as well as you possibly can. You may, so it's not Modi, of course, but it's, he's at the top, but he has his strategists, try and figure out exactly when you represent the antagonist to its fullest extent, you honor the antagonist.
Right.
And I believe that we must do that. Not doing that is the crime of our civilizations in society, not honoring the antagonistic point of view. Honor the antagonist by really getting it on there. No one will fault you for that, Pranshu.
Yeah, no, Sun Tzu says that. Yeah, know your enemy.
Yeah, and then write your point of view in that 4th paragraph, and then conclude. If you do a good job with the antagonist and the protagonist, right? That's what we're doing. We're framing an antagonist and protagonist stance, right? Then when we conclude, we do not come up with easy conclusions. We don't come up with the conclusion, you're right, you're wrong. Oh, I'm sorry, you're wrong and I'm right. Oh, what a coincidence. We don't come up with that. We come up with, it's complicated. But you've put your position, you've influenced the conversation. Because right now, of course, there isn't this more complex conversation that's going on.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what you're going to add. So I would love to see that. Can you please write that? We're going to take July off, but maybe can you write it and get it to me by Thursday, and I'll read through it.
I'll do that.
Comments, and then I'll send it off to you. Judy, I mean, to me, I mean, the things that you touch upon in this, I mean, it's a lot.
You're talking about if DM hadn't gone to school with RFK, history would be different.
Yeah. And I know if I were involved in this too, I would want to have a quote or two from Ashvani, since he's a pro. In this,
No, I'll definitely clean it up. I'll make it like a single point. I was thinking the second part I wanted to showcase was, as I was talking about it, every time we were rejected.
Pranchu, I'm going to steer you away from showcasing. Don't showcase anything, okay? I'm just trying to give you a form. I'm trying to contain, like, you have this intellect that goes out like this, and I'm trying to create what is it? That one is fission or fusion? Fusion. I'm trying to create a fusion bomb here by containing this into this space. And then the reader's going to read it and they're going to go, okay? That's it.
Alrighty. Yep, thanks.
I love this article. I also want to know where you're printing this, and I'd like to get it when you.
I was going to submit it to Abhinav for Indica.
Yeah, nice. I think you're
Okay.
big. Anything else?
Otis, I have a short question on the previous thing. Can I just?
Who's asking?
Sunil.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Yeah. Basically, what I understood is that you want the reader to have a vicarious experience, and you mentioned that to make it more personal, base the character on slightly on yourself. But say if the reader is not interested, if say I am interested in something obscure and I go on and on about that, and my perception of the audience is that they would not be interested in that, and like in the Matrix we have this totally out of the box character Neo, so that is certainly in my perception not based on anybody the character knew. Perhaps he may have as in some characteristics might be based on the writer. So is it like, my question is basically, is it right to base some part of the character on your internal whatever representation?
Yeah, so the reason I say, look at ourselves is not to say that we base a character solely on ourselves, because that would severely limit us in terms of what we were doing, but that we we examine the self in order to understand, in a way, a kind of core humanity. I think that's how we should look at it. We're not examining ourselves to think of ourselves as a particular specific person, completely unique among the multitude, right? Among the billions. And I think that that's probably ridiculous to think that that would be the case. Instead, we examine ourselves to try and know our deepest heart in order to find actually the universal human spirit. I can speak about this, but unfortunately speaking about it is glib, But these are the things that we talk about as writers as being human struggle, the struggle of the self and versus the world. This is a universal aspect. Our drive to struggle against that world, to make the world our own, that is a universal human struggle. If we can, to basically come up with a sense of, to exercise one's will over the environment, that is a universal human struggle. And that's basically what happens in the story, right? Ashvani's story, to pronounce that a little bit better, could be like that, right? We start with the character in a, the unsettled, ground situation, the unstable ground situation, right? And they want to stabilize that, right? They don't like to be in an unstable ground situation. They want it to be settled. So they act. This is the first action of character. They do something in order to control the world, in order to control the monkey, right? In order to control the gods. Whatever it is that they want to do, they act in order to have their will be dominant over everything else. Well, what happens? The antagonist, the world, doesn't just lay down. They're not just a straw man. It says, oh, okay, Ashwani, you're right. You just do whatever you want. Sorry, I'm picking on you a little bit, of course. But, you know, the world doesn't lay down for the protagonist. It strikes back, right? And it beats that poor character down. But then the character doesn't give up. That's the human spirit. They try again to exert their will upon the world. Does the world lay down? No. It is back, right? And this is the struggle. The character strives, boom, struggles, boom, struggles, until they realize that they have to make a decision for themselves. It isn't about being victorious or not victorious. Anyway, I'm going on a little bit, but when we look at ourselves, I encourage you to see that aspect within yourself and to give that spirit to your character. That's what I'm
So,
trying to say.
can I say, based on your, say, whatever fund of experiences, internal experiences, just make the characterization more complex and engaging? Is that a fair summation, or is that simplified?
I mean, those are some words that we could apply to this process, but I think that they won't get us very much closer to understanding it in a very deep way. I think what does get us close to understanding it is when we can look at ourselves and see how we are also a character. We also behave as a protagonist. We engage in this kind of struggle, and to see the passion that we have in that engagement, no matter how small and minute it might be, and it might be small and minute, or it might be grand. We have it, and then we want to give that same kind of intensity and passion to our protagonist. That's what we see in ourselves, and then we give it to our character. That's how I would express it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, those were some highfalutin words. Thank you, everyone. I will get back to those who I will get back to this week, and then I will see the rest of you sometime August.
Yes, I think we'll figure out over email, Otis, when we should reconvene, based on your travel and everything. But I think we will take a break in the month of July.
Okay.